The Ultimate Blind Guardian talk continues. Welcome everyone. Welcome Mark. Welcome Ronnie. Markus. Andre. And back in the game, Truman.
Hello. Let's talk about Tokyo Tales this time. So we recorded 4 normal studio albums before that. So how did the idea evolve to do a live album?
I think it was quite obvious for us once we were announced for Japan that this would be the best option. I'm a big Deep Purple fan, and Made in Japan was is one of my favorite live albums. So that was a kind of role model for me always. And in a perfect world, I always thought that would be the best entrance for Blind Guardian to do so. On the other hand, we also had 4 great albums, which were not really presented in a live form up to that point, leaving out Run for the Night on the Tales from the Twilight World album as a bonus track. It just felt right.
And the technical situation in Japan was perfect. I mean, it was very easy to have a recording studio there, mobile recording studio and stuff like this. And the Japanese work very precise. So it was clear that it would work technical-wise if we record there.
So how was it to be in Japan as rock stars for the first time? You were only in your mid-20s.
Cultural shock, because everything was completely different compared to whatever we experienced here before. I mean, we were used to play decent clubs, decent venues here, and there you go to those big theaters. The record company surrounded us with bodyguards and stuff like that, which we never wanted, and we tried to escape from them. But everything was completely different. Super fancy hotels, fans everywhere, screaming fans that were flooding us with presents. It was
Feeling like the Beatles.
It was a weird experience.
This was as closest as you could get to, for sure. Yeah.
Crazy. And it was crazy to keep a straight mind, because we were really into partying.
Yeah.
And I remember that we didn't get any sleep. And after a while, we got some problems. Because of the lack of sleep. We always thought there was earthquakes, and there wasn't. I remember, Andy, do you feel it? It's shaking again, right? Yeah, maybe. But I think it was really the lack of sleep.
Yeah, there was not a lot. Not the wisest idea for live recording. So we were lucky how everything finally turned out. But the energy and the excitement that was transferred due to the recordings, and obviously in the shows as well, the people totally loved what we were doing. We were also not used to have an audience which were keenly listening instead of having a party. The Japanese fans had a party, but that was different because they still, were really into the music and became a part of the whole thing, but in a completely different way than we were used to play or, to be received by the audience. I remember that was maybe the first time that the audience was singing the Liebtas.
Yes, that was really crazy. When they started singing the solos all over, and I was like, oh, what's going on?
But the whole setup was so different compared to Europe, because obviously when we were touring here, we had support bands. So the support started at 8. We went on stage at 9:30 or whatever. In Japan, we were playing alone, no support bands, and the gigs started at 6 in the evening and were done by 8 o'clock or whatever. And the venues were seated, and there were no barriers in front of the stage. There were 3 guys wearing suits and white gloves. They were holding a line. That was the barrier in front of the stage, and no fan was touching that line. As I said, there were seated venues. They all got up when we started playing, but they didn't leave the area from their seats. So it was all in order. And there was a queue at the merchandise, and the people were waiting in line, 2 by 2, and the line was circling around the whole venue. But there was not this chaos that you were used to from European gigs. Everything was different.
Mm-hmm. And Hansi, you mentioned in interviews that you replaced some of the bass guitar in the studio later on. So, but after that tour, you also played 2 more tours on the bass guitar. So, but was this
One more tour.
one more tour? Yeah. But is this the time that you decided to not play bass anymore?
No, if the music would have been the same after Somewhere Far Beyond, I might have continued. It was not very comfortable always, but the structures of the songs that can be recognized on Imaginations already, they became more and more difficult. And the way I designed the vocals, they were also running not along with the music, but were setting counterpoints. And to do that and to do the bass at the same time is quite difficult and ambitious, and this was the reason why I quitted it. Somewhere I did not have that problem. It was just the regular mistakes, and that would have been okay, I think, to continue like this.
The Lord of the Rings version is the first official live recording where it can be heard that you integrated a part of the demo version of the song and skipped the solos from the album version. Usually you don't make that such dramatic changes. Do you remember how you were thinking back in those days?
I think we just recognized right after the recording of Lord of the Rings in the studio that the flow was not good. As far as I remember, the chorus was played too fast or something like this. It just didn't feel right. And we felt that the demo version was far more attractive with regard to the whole arrangement. And as far as I remember, this has been the main reason for us to just, go back to this and mingle it a little bit and come up with a quite interesting version.
I think in the shows we played before the Japan tour, we played it a little bit freewheel.
I remember.
And some versions were just created by leaving things open.
Mm-hmm.
And then things happened and we liked it. And then we said, okay, we'll do this again. That's...
Yeah, maybe it was Kalle scratching one of the vocal parts to make it a more compressed version. I have no idea really why we did that. I think the one we are playing live is the one which has the best spirit, and that hasn't changed up to now. And if change is happening like this, and I don't even know if we exactly play the same version that we did back then, that is more or less a natural process where no one really is discussing things, but it just happens.
Do you remember why this song was chosen to be the bonus track?
No, I think it was simply... Maybe the reason was we wanted a really heavy live album with all the aggression and passion, we have in the intense songs, and therefore this could be the reason why we skipped it. Quality-wise, there's no reason.
Yeah. And during these days, we always had the feeling that a slow song or a ballad in between the set would break the whole set. And we didn't like that too much. It was still speed metal.
The album contains 12 tracks plus the intro, but the actual shows, they were actually much longer. For instance, you played Run for the Night and Theater of Pain, but you also played both the Bard songs. And it's a little bit surprising that you didn't feature In the Forest, since that has been such a big fan favorite. How come?
Did we play that on that tour? Because I don't remember.
We played it several times.
Yeah,
but it never came out so great.
Did we still play it like on the album?
In
That
the
fast,
in the
crappy
first,
version?
yeah, in the first versions, it didn't came out so great. We were never satisfied. I remember we played it maybe 10, 15 years ago again in a tour, and then it was good. Then it was really good. But in the old days, we were never really happy.
No, we played it ever since the Imaginations tour, and it had the same impression on people.
I told you 10 years ago. I know. Okay.
I'm not good at math.
So it was not actually a fan favorite on the Somewhere tour.
Maybe it was not. I really cannot recall. Maybe we didn't perform it good enough. That could be another reason.
Yeah,
what I recall is that when we played it in the beginning, it was not known to people. So it was not the sing-along it later on became. That might have been the reason.
Did we play it on the whole tour, on the summer tour?
I do not know.
Maybe not.
I don't think so.
But that's the main reason, Hasi, for sure.
Yeah.
It was not famous enough, this song, for compared to the in the photos, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That was not
Okay, it
famous
went
enough.
well when we did
had
the
to decide
Imaginations
for so
tour, I
much
remember
songs, and then we said we keep this down.
What do you mean not famous enough?
Every song is famous.
Right.
So I think the live album was very good received, and you were pretty much everyone's darling back in the days. So did the fact that you released a live album somehow inspire the songwriting to Imaginations from Versailles?
I wouldn't say so.
Neither would I. I think we were on, really on a very high level with regard to everything. The success might have pushed us. That for sure, I can say. And Tokyo Tales was also very successful. But when it came to the songwriting, we were very open, I think. We were like blank papers. There was not a lot of thinking back on what we have done before. Just the wish and the ambition to create something new and maybe even more spectacular than Somewhere Far Beyond. And if I look back, I would not even say I felt pressure, but that might be wrong.
I think the Tokyo Tales album opened some doors for us. For the the international success was there, and it was obvious because we had this album and we were recognized in Europe much better, and it opened doors for the Imaginations album later on. So I think it was a very important album for us. It was for the reputation of Blind Guardian. All of a sudden, we were a kind of international band.
I think so too. It was because of the journalists and the magazines who wrote so much about the Japan tour, what happened there, how successful we were there, that we went on place 1 in the charts there, with Somewhere Far Beyond, and that we played a very successful tour there. And here in Germany, and I think even in Europe, you have really the problem. You can play, 10 years, release every year an album, and the people will accept that you are a good band. But if they suddenly hear, wow, they have been in Japan, then you are something different. You know what I mean? Like another universe. I don't know. It has some kind of this reaction to the people, and this is, I think, what happened anyhow to Blind Guardian with this tour. So good luck.
I think we'll add this question. You played with several live keyboardists during the years, but I think this is the only live album where we actually introduced the live keyboardist. So I guess all old fans knows Mr. Mark C. But he's not been known after that. What happened to him, and who was this guy?
We met him when we played with Iced Earth for the Somewhere tour. He was their keyboarder back then, and I have no idea how they got in contact, but we liked him a lot. And since we knew that Japan would be something very special, we were considering a keyboarder to be a good idea for our live setup, and it stayed like this ever since. So we asked him if he was willing to do so, and obviously he took up the challenge, went with us to Japan and did an extremely great job. But we split ways afterwards. He went back to California, and we just developed into a different direction. It was not to be a long engagement. It was obvious that this was just for the Japan tour, and afterwards we would look for someone else. He is a very nice guy. We met him when we played back in the States 2 years ago, and we had some fun together. So Mark's still a great guy, and he's doing music still.
So Tokyo Tales was also the last record that you did with Kalle Trapp Do you remember why this was the last one?
We had problems when we did Somewhere. There were a lot of arguments. Arguments are normal in a production, otherwise you cannot develop. But this went a little too far and was obscure at points. It was bizarre. So we have had a discussion even prior to Tokyo Tales what to do with the next album. Then we did Tokyo Tales and we were not completely satisfied with the way things went there. Kalle was with us in Japan and did an okay job as a front of house guy. But when we did the mixing, he was too much of the opinion to design that in a more or less studio album way, and we didn't like that. So we had to convince him to play with the ambience and, you know, give a certain role to the audience. That was quite a long discussion, and this might have been the last nail.
So we can go back to what Torben said before, that you were considered like a bigger band because you had a reputation now from Japan. And when doing research for this questioning, I was so surprised. For instance, in Metal Hammer Germany, you ended up at soundcheck at place number 2 with a live album. And also when reading interviews from Somewhere and till Imagination, it's like you almost became the media, or the heavy metal media darlings compared to the previous albums. How do you think that how did you establish this contact with the German metal press?
It again was a natural process. We haven't really thought about that because before that we were treated very nicely by most of the media, I have to say. That has never been a problem. Of course, we were not first priority, but the more successful the albums became, the more pages we got in the media and we got more radio interviews, blah, blah, blah. But that has not really changed the relationship. And we were in good terms always, but there was always a distance in between us and the journalists. It was not like, you know, we have had some friends and they are still friends, but for most of them it was like a professional relationship. And I think it's a logical term to give more feature to a band which is really up and going.
I remember they also did a feature, Rock Hard did a feature, Buffo was with us in Japan doing a full tour report. So they recognized that there was something big happening for us, and they published it.
Yeah. I also think, if you have to correct me, but I think that article among the readers were voted the best article from '92.
Yeah, might be.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, we were entertaining back then. You know, that has changed. Now we are more the serious guys, but back then it was a good story. And this I remember, yeah, and there was a lot to tell. There would have been even more to tell, but you know,
confidential.
there are some hidden secrets.
I think the greatest thing about Tokyo Tales is that the audience is so loud on that album. How did that evolve back then, or how did you achieve that in the mix?
First of all, we really fought for it. Every one of us. We were like, you know, one voice. We all had the same vision, you know, how a live album was supposed to sound. And we were really, really arguing with Kalle a lot about that. And he finally, luckily, gave in because this is the icing on the cake of this album, I think. On the other hand, pure coincidence, or maybe Kalle is more genius than I thought. He was doing the front of house mixes in Japan. And the front of house music, the signal was quite low. So people in the back of the venue had problems to listen to what we were doing. But for the live recording, it was brutally good because then when you drive in the ambience, you just hear the audience. And this is what we did.
Yeah.
That's the next live album we play without PA.
No, we play with Kalle, which is the same.
Yeah, kind of.
But I mean, he did a great job in mixing it. I mean, do not misunderstand me. It was just a tough way to get there, and we had to fight for it a lot.
And another factor about the album, which is quite funny looking back, I think that must have been one of the first gigs that you did to an international audience. So you were talking English, and back then you're telling quite funny stuff there.
Yeah,
to Journey
I
Through
tend
Time.
to do that from time to time, you know, even in these days. It really depends a little on the mood. Back then, you know, none of the introductions never ever is prepared. So, you know, if I'm having a bad day, there will not come a lot of smart words out of my mouth.
But his bad days are good days for us.
Sometimes they are, right? In this particular case, I think we have had some international shows before, but no one paid attention. I just listened back to one of the shows you can watch and listen to on YouTube. And this includes German introductions, and they were lousy too. So why changing something which works? But to be honest, we haven't really thought about it. And for us, it felt like, well, we're all good, and you know, you can do it this way. I think again, the excitement which is delivered throughout the introductions is also a big plus point of the album.
Yeah, and it's pretty charming looking back at these.
Maybe it is.
jokes.
I'm sometimes surprised because I do not listen back too many times, but when we did this remixes and remasterings, in this case only remasterings, you know, I was forced to listen to. It was like, okay, now I know what the people are talking about.
I think it was very courageous of Hansi, because we were all shocked by the when the audience went down and it was silent moment. Then we were all like, oh, what's going on?
Yeah.
And he was blah, 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 blah. And everyone was
Great.
yeah.